Andy Mations was once babysitting a friend's kid, and they were eating lunch together like normal, when she noticed that the little boy's right hand was curled up into a strange, half-opened fist. Andy Mations asked him what he was holding, and he showed her what was in his hand. He was holding a squishy ball of dead worms. There were over a dozen of them just squished into this nasty, unmoving ball. She was horrified and cautiously said, "The worms have to go back to their worm families." The kid was upset, but finally agreed to put the worms back into the garden.
When they were around 18, James Shark and his friend went to a skate park where they got drunk and created a game. Their game had them pissing into empty beer bottles before kicking them off the park's half pipe, which was where they were hanging out. A guy was walking by when he was nearly hit by flying shards of glass, pissing him off. He insulted James Shark and his friend, yelling at them and threatening to punch them in the face. After a while, the guy cooled off and walked away. James Shark got so angry at the guy that he wanted revenge, so he went to a bike that he saw chained to a fence nearby and began spitting on it, thinking it belonged to that guy. Then James Shark began to feel sick and puked all over the saddle while his friend laughed. To this day, James Shark still isn't sure whether that bike belonged to that guy or not.
One time, Sweet Commander was invited to his friend's house, but the second he walked in, he smelt something weird. He looked over in the corner of the room and saw that there was a big piece of shit on the floor. Sweet Commander's friend didn't have any pets or younger siblings, and he was the only person home. Sweet Commander couldn't ignore the smell, so he put it out the rug and said,
"Hey, do you know who took a shit on the floor?"
He expected his friend to be really embarrassed, but he just casually waved it off and said, "Nah man, that's just some Play-Doh." 10 minutes later, Sweet Commander faked a call from his mum and got the hell out of there.
Ramona saw two kids fighting over who got to name the fish they won at the state fair. This one kid wanted to name the fish Toilet Bowl because he knew the fish would die quickly. The other kid wanted to name it Free Blade because of a video game he played on his iPad. When they fought, Ramona just sat there dying of laughter while they hit each other. The mum eventually stepped in and broke them up. The fish ended up dying the next day.
When Sweet Commando was a teenager, he went to his first party and got really drunk. At the end of the night, his friends abandoned him and Sweet Commando had no way to get home. He couldn't call his super strict parents, so he was forced to call his sister, who was usually mean and selfish. Sweet Commando's sister had to drive hours to get to the party. Sweet Commando thought she would be super pissed, but instead of judging him, she just gave him some water, collected his things, and put him in the car. She drove him all the way home, stopping every 5 minutes so Sweet Commando could puke, and even bought him a pack of cigarettes. That was the first time Sweet Commando and his sister bonded as adults. He'll never forget it.
One time Gogak had a friend over at his house and they were playing some games. Meanwhile, his dad was skinny dipping with some friends. That was fine until Gogak's dad came in with two of his female friends and said to Gogak,
"Son, I'm gonna make you into a man."
He was clearly drunk and it looked like the girls were as well, so they might have agreed to it. Gogak could have been fine with it, but then his dad pissed himself and puked all over a chair. The two girls helped him up, Gogak's friend went home, and Gogak just went upstairs in embarrassment. That was the last time he heard of that plan.
When Derek was younger, he had a lot of stuffed toys, action figures, and collectibles in his room. To say he was a bit self-conscious might have been an understatement, but Derek felt like his toys were always watching him. Whenever Derek had to change his clothes, he would turn every toy around so that he didn't have to feel their judging eyes looking at him while he was naked. If he had to change quickly, he could feel the gaze and it completely freaked him out. He always imagined that they would talk about him behind his back, judging him for his disrespectful display of nudity.
When Legner was younger, he dated a really cute girl. He called her his little raccoon because of the way her hair framed her face. Legner was at her house one day just hanging out, listening to music, and he started getting hungry. So he asked her if she had anything they could snack on. She went to the cabinet in the kitchen, got a box of Swiss cake rolls. They each grabbed a package of 2, started eating them. Between bites, she asked Legner if he wanted to see a trick. She then proceeded to put an entire roll into her mouth, chewed it up, and then slowly spit it back into her hands. Staring with jaw dropped, Legner wondered, where is this going? It turns out where it was going was back in her mouth. Legner laughed a little, nervously, and ever since then he always responds with a resounding no when someone asks if he wants to see a trick.
When Honeybits was 10, her grandpa gave her a glass baby doll. She didn't want to be rude, so she accepted the gift. When Honeybits got home, she put the doll on the floor in her closet, but when she went to sleep, she had this dream where the doll was covered in blood and holding a knife. When she woke up, the doll was missing, but when she went to her parents' bedroom, the doll was next to the bed. So Honeybits took the doll and locked it in the closet. Then she called her friend, who came over and looked at the doll. She told Honeybits to lock her door at night and then ran out of the door with the doll. The next day, she gave the doll back and told Honeybits that everything will be fine, and ever since then her friend refused to tell her what had happened when she looked at the doll.
One time when Gergak was 14, he went over to his friend's house to pick up a video game. His friend's dad let him in and told Gergak to just go up to his friend's room and grab the game. Gergak opened the door and gasped. His friend's older brother was lying on the bed with no shirt on, and hanging from the fan above him were 5 naked Barbie dolls. The brother looked extremely embarrassed. He quickly jumped up and took down the Barbies. Gergak had no idea what he'd just walked in on, but he knew it was weird. He covered his eyes and said, don't mind me, just need to grab my game. He then pushed the memory way down into the traumatic memories section of his brain.
During Animation's freshman year of high school, she and her 2 best friends were hanging out with a guy at the library. During the conversation, Andy had started to talk about Hamilton the musical. It was all fine and dandy until he said, "You know, Hamilton isn't real, right?" Seriously, he just said Alexander Hamilton wasn't real.
When Legner was in 8th grade, he just couldn't keep his grades up. His parents had made numerous attempts to right the issues such as tutoring and even testing for learning disabilities. All had failed, much like his test scores. So his dad decided that it was time for a new approach. He punished Legner by making him stand on a street corner with a sign displaying his grades. Legner actually chose this punishment over the other option, which was to forego his cell phone for 2 weeks. Soon after, his family got a visit from Child Protective Services, who wanted to check up on Legner's well-being after word spread about the strange punishment.
Pandora once got paid to sit on her friend's toilet for 30 minutes while taking a dump. Every day for a month, she made about $145 just from taking a shit. That is, until one day when she overheard her friend's parents talking about how her shit felt different than her friends'. What? One of her friend's parents even said, "Oh, her poop is so soft." After that, Pandora stopped going to her friend's house and is no longer friends with her. What the fuck?
When Spences was 19, she had a boyfriend, Tulip, who liked how she wore her hair, which was straight. He said, "Wow, I love your hair. Don't ever change it." The next week, she got a frohawk. Tulip saw it and said, "Why did you change your hair? Ew, it doesn't even go with what you're wearing." Spences said, "I think it's cute." Tulip said, "Well, I don't. I think it's ugly. I just can't be with you. We are over!" Then he walked out of the house and left his stuff. So Spences took it to his mom's house and told her, "He broke up with me because he said my hair was ugly." When Tulip came back and apologized, Spences told him, "It's too late, buddy. Your clothes and your stuff are already at your mom's house."
When Honeybits was 11, she and her family went camping in Wales. They arrived so late that they pretty much put up their tents and went straight to bed. Before going to sleep, Honeybits decided to take a Snapchat selfie. As she went through her different filters, she noticed that the camera was detecting 2 faces, hers and someone, or something, next to her. Honeybits was creeped out, but shrugged it off as a glitch. Later on, she got up to use the bathroom. On the way to the toilet block, she heard what sounded like a child sobbing. This was strange because there was no one else staying at this campsite. She followed the sound and saw a young girl on her knees crying. Honeybits asked her if she was okay, and the girl looked up, giving her a blank, soulless stare. The mysterious girl said,
"You're the same,"
and disappeared before Honeybits could find out what she meant.
When Salty Squid was 17, he was admitted to the hospital with a serious heart problem. When the doctors decided that he needed a new heart, they sent him to Sweden to get it. After Salty Squid was hooked up to a machine, his brother flew in from Iceland to see him. Once he got there, he asked Salty Squid if he could do anything for him. He told his brother that he saw an ad on TV for an Xbox, so his brother left the hospital to go to the mall. He returned with a box containing a new Xbox One with 3 extra controllers and 10 game discs. He set it up for Salty Squid, handed him a controller, and told him that because he had bought it for him, that he had to play Halo 3 with him. It was the only source of entertainment Salty Squid had during his otherwise boring stay at the hospital. Hellbent got up to get a snack one night and walked down the stairs when he immediately got the feeling that something wasn't right. So he used his phone as a torch and looked around. Through the window, he could see a pitch-black face staring at him with eyes that seemed to just be holes going straight through its head. It had its hands on the window. It smiled at him before sinking out of sight. He went closer to the window and he saw it walking off on all fours. It was abnormally thin, and once it was down the driveway, he saw it glance back at him before a gust of wind blew snow in front of it. Luckily, he never saw it again, nor did he want to.
When Civil Spider's little brother was 3, his dad invited over one of his friends. His dad's friends decided to bring over his girlfriend, who had gigantic boobs. They were all in the living room just hanging out when Civil Spider's little brother decided to walk over to the girlfriend, who was sitting on the couch, and poke her boobs as he stated, "You have big boobs!" Everyone was silent as the girlfriend agreed, "Yes, I do have big boobs." Everyone was wetting themselves as they laughed at what happened. Civil Spider's dad said through his tears of laughter, "Dang, every time I do that, I get slapped." His little brother just sat there, looking confused. That was a great night.
Back when he was a freshman, Hellbent met a girl who seemed interesting. Although they had a lot in common, the only flaw was that she was a huge fan of creepypastas. Hellbent liked creepypastas too, but his new girlfriend was crazy about them. She would make up new ones, read all the fanfics, and just not stop talking about them whenever an opportunity arose. At the time, Hellbent didn't mind, until that one day a few months into their relationship. His girlfriend went up to him with tears in her eyes. When Hellbent asked what was wrong, she told him that she had cheated on him and was having a baby with the other guy. So she had to break up with him so that she could be there for her child. Hellbent was confused considering how his new girlfriend was definitely not ready to have sex. When he asked who she had cheated on him with, she went online and pulled up a picture of Jeff the killer. Hellbent asked her if she was serious, and she frantically tried to convince him that she was. So he just let her dump him and hasn't seen her since.
Nixium was in Spain when he was about 2 years old. He was at the beach with his mom and grandma, and right as he came out of the water, the lady next to them went in. When Nixium came out of the water, he really had to pee, and the lady next to them left her picnic basket open. He thought it was a toilet and peed in it. It covered all her sandwiches, and when she came back, she wondered why her sandwiches were soggy and smelled bad. Nixium's family didn't see him do it.
Pringle was 6 or 7 when he lived in Texas and had his room right next to his mom and dad's. He always had nightmares about the man in the wall. One night, Pringle woke up screaming and then saw his dad in the doorway with a knife, but he was just staring at the wall. When Pringle looked over, he saw the man, who was very tall and all black with a weird crown or something on his head. After that, Pringle screamed and started crying. Then his dad walked into the kitchen and put the knife away. Then he went back to bed, so Pringle ran back into his room again, but the man was still there, standing by the closet. Pringle let out the loudest scream, and his mom came in with a gun and asked what was wrong. He told her that the man in the wall had tried to hurt him. The next day at the table, he asked his dad why he had the knife and was just standing at the doorway to his room. But his dad had no memory of this, and he asked Pringle if he was dreaming. He told his dad the whole story. Now Pringle is 13 and has a little brother who wakes up screaming sometimes with the same nightmare.
When Pandora was 11, she dated a guy who had really strict parents. They managed to date for a couple of months, but then his parents found out. He started asking weird questions like, "Would you cry if you broke up with me?" That night, Pandora checked her phone and she had a message from her friend. It said, "Your boyfriend says he doesn't want to go out with you anymore because his parents found out and he doesn't want to date you anymore." Pandora got secondhand dumped by text by her friend on behalf of her actual boyfriend. When she was 11, Gooby was playing tea party with her baby sister, Snoopy. They filled the cups with actual sweet tea and began drinking it while eating raisins. Suddenly, Gooby accidentally spilled her tea all over the brand new carpet. She didn't want to tell her parents, so she covered it up with Snoopy's toy box. A few days later, their mom was vacuuming when she moved the toy box and saw the stain. She blamed Gooby since Snoopy was too little to even pour tea. Instead of doing something like taking her tablet away, Gooby's mom made her lick it off the carpet, not wanting to risk getting yelled at anymore. Gooby obeyed. She ended up getting carpet fibers and hair all over her tongue. She didn't get the stain out, making her mom yell at her again. In the end, her mom just put Snoopy's toy box over the stain and ignored it. Gooby still feels a little tickle in the back of her throat from licking that carpet. Ew.
One time, Salty Squid and his girlfriend were being flirtatious. She said something and he tried to think of something to say in return. Eventually, he mustered up the courage to say what was on his mind, which was,
I gotta tell you something crazy. So lube up that eye hole, love, cause I'm gonna fuck your mind. I mean...
She gave him a confused look and said she didn't understand. Salty Squid said,
Oh god dang it, I messed it up.
She laughed and said that she actually did understand. To this day, they continue to laugh about it, though it doesn't make it any less embarrassing.
Dolan had a girlfriend he really loved who came over to hang out and watch The Walking Dead all night. They were watching the 7th season and they got to the episode where Glenn dies. When that happened, she got up, grabbed a hammer, smashed his TV, and said, "Screw you, I don't want to see you ever again." And she meant it.
The dumbest excuse Andy ever heard was when she was helping her little sister learn how to bake. She gave her some recipes to try, and then, when she was done, Andy would taste test the dish and grade it. The next day, when her little sister had to bring the food she baked, Andy asked, "Where is your homework?" Her little sister said, "Well, I was coming here. A savage monkey riding a fox with an army of cats surrounding it told me to hand over the pie. I told him it was my homework, but he snatched it out of my hands and he screamed, 'I'm the Monkey King,' before stuffing it in his mouth and riding off." She then gave Andy an awkward smile. Andy bent over and whispered, "You live here." Her little sister froze, looked to her left, and then ran away.
Every school has a list of banned items that can't be brought onto school grounds. Sweet Commando School is just oddly specific. Most schools are content to just list weapons as banned items and leave it at that. But Sweet Commando was baffled that his junior high school guidelines actually listed rocket launchers under firearms that could not be brought on school grounds. He could sort of understand the logic behind it, but where are people going to get a rocket launcher, and why?
When Gooby was 8 years old, she heard a noise in her kitchen at 2 a.m. one morning. She then heard a strange whisper, so she grabbed her cat and decided to check it out. In the middle of her kitchen, she could see all the cabinets were open and a black figure standing there, looking at her. She froze with fear and just stared back while her cat hissed and ran away. She stepped back slowly, then ran back to her bedroom. When she returned to the kitchen the next morning, all the cabinets were open, but the black figure wasn't there.
Back in high school, Sid worked at a taco stand in an amusement park. A week after he started working there, his boss threw a box of gloves on the counter in front of him. He told Sid to fill 5 with sour cream and 5 with ranch dressing. Thinking it was a joke, Sid ignored him, but then his boss came back about 10 minutes later and demanded to know where his gloves were. Nervous, he did what his boss told him to do. He tied the bottoms of the gloves shut before putting them in the refrigerator. It turned out that his boss only wanted the gloves filled so that he could squeeze the contents of each of them into the condiments bottles. Although Sid thought it was a smart idea in hindsight, he still wonders why his boss didn't just tell him in the first place.
Ramona was hanging out with a friend and they were discussing ideas for food. Since Ramona is pretty lazy, she asked her friend, "You want to eat out?" Her friend stared back at Ramona with a weird expression. She misheard and thought Ramona was asking to eat her out. She realized the confusion and quickly added, "At a restaurant? Geez, I know I'm bisexual, but I still have standards." Luckily, her friend had a good sense of humor and they both laughed it off. And then they got tacos.
Nixium and his brother were out of batteries for their Wii remotes, so they thought it'd be a good idea to walk down to the store that is 3 streets away. On their way there was a dog that busted through its fence and tried attacking them. Seeing how the dog just darted up to them barking, Nixium screamed like a little girl. Then a guy next door with a cane walked up to his fence and yelled at the dog. The dog ran back. The guy called them over and told them that the dog is in the store's parking lot attacking people. He handed them a rock and said if the dog gets any closer to drop it on its head and puncture a hole in its skull. They just nodded and awkwardly walked away, keeping a close eye on the dog.
The strangest thing Gooby ever saw her boyfriend Dolan do was on her birthday. He didn't have enough money for a gift, so Gooby suggested some kinky boudoir play instead. Dolan knew that Gooby was a little into sadism, but didn't know what would turn her on. So, after some foreplay, Dolan told her to close her eyes for her present. Gooby heard a lighter click, then there was a terrible smell. Curious, Gooby peeked and saw that Dolan had soaked his pubic hair in lighter fluid and set it on fire. There was pure terror in his eyes, but he still mustered the courage to say,
"Won't blow out your candle, baby. Happy birthday!"
They put out the flames before he got hurt and never did anything like that again.
Spinal Palm was told by his mom to never ride his skateboard at night. Being the rebellious young man he was, he disobeyed his mom and went skateboarding one night. While he was having a good time on his skateboard, Spinal Palm fell and scraped his knee. When he got home, his mom asked him what had happened. Spinal Palm told her that aliens had taken a blood sample. She didn't buy it, and he was grounded for a month.
Nixium was walking home from a bar one night when he saw a very drunk guy riding his bike in the opposite direction. The guy could barely stay upright and swaying around. He hit the curb going full speed and launched himself headfirst into the back of a road sign. Naturally, he laughed at the poor guy, but he wouldn't get up, so Nixium tried to help him. The guy was completely drenched in his own blood. He gave Nixium a thumbs up while saying, "I'm fine." He then proceeded to grab his bike and ride away, only to hit a taxi, smearing the white cab in his blood, only to ride off again, yelling, "I'm fine!"
Back when I was a kid, I remember my mom and dad would be so mean to me sometimes, yelling at me and telling me to clean my room and all that stuff. So I had a journal, a secret journal that I kept, that I would write bad things about my parents in, where I would call them names and say they were dumb and how I didn't need them and, all that stuff that we did when we were younger. So I'd write all that stuff down. But one day, my mom, she came into my room and was cleaning it, and she found the journal. She went through pages and pages of curse words, insults, slander, anything that I could write in there, terrible pictures that I had drawn of them. So much stuff. And needless to say, I got in a lot of trouble. I didn't see the light of day for the next several years.
Slaptam did 2 different, pretty desperate things for 2 different girls he was trying to impress. Once, he had a crush on a huge anime fan, so he decided to make a bento box for her. She appreciated the effort, but Slaptam didn't really know what he was doing, so she got sick from food poisoning. The other girl was one he'd known since 3rd grade. She really liked birds, so on her birthday, Slaptam decided to cover himself in feathers and make a sexy bird call. And he did it in the middle of lunch at school. So he embarrassed himself in front of the entire freshman class.
Sid had a world history teacher named Mr. Damaris. He would often talk about his collection of historical artifacts, and on occasion, he would bring them in. One day he said to the class, "Later this week, we will be talking about the Vikings, and if any of you show up in a somewhat historically accurate costume, you automatically get an A on this next test. If more than 3 of you do it, I will show up in a full suit of armor on Monday and will wear it for the whole week." Friday rolled around, and 3 of Sid's classmates were wearing rags and covered nearly head to toe in paint. Mr. Damaris, he was impressed at the attention to detail, and by the time Monday rolled around, Sid had totally forgotten about the armor. But sure enough, when he walked into his 5th period history class, there was Mr. Damaris standing in a suit of 16th century French battle armor. Sid nearly dropped his books, and just as he said, Mr. Damaris wore the suit for the entire week.